The idea of having a fully restored machine, vehicle, or other manufactured good is a pleasant one for most people. In a previous video in this Walker-Turner restoration series, I posed the question, what's actually involved in restoring a table saw or other shop machine? The purpose of that question was to help you gather information as you decide whether or not you'd like to take on a restoration project of your own. In this video, I take you a little bit further into the disassembly of my machine, specifically the trunnion and pulley systems, hand wheels, and all the other associated components and hardware. After disassembly, each piece is cleaned and polished to hopefully what is a like-new condition. There's a couple great opportunities along the way, so let's not waste any more time and get started right now. I'm going to start here with the motor mount plate. Missing one here, so I will replace that before reassembly. This definitely looks to be fairly stripped out, so unless I can re-thread that, I'll have to replace this bolt and others like it before reassembly. Good idea when you have random bolts that go specifically, there's no other parts that go with it, just tape them up before you put them in your bag so those will stay together during the restoration. Little easier to get at these set screws by flipping this thing over, giving my hands a little bit more space to work with. When I flipped it over, I noticed there's another bracket inside here that I wasn't quite aware of, right here. So I think if I loosen that nut right there, then this whole piece will separate from that bracket. All right, so this is the inside between the two main halves. And this little swing arm actually is just in there loosely. What I read about this particular machine, and I might not be using the correct term, but one of the manuals I read mentioned something about a gun stock raising and lowering system. So no matter which way you're turning the raising and lowering mechanism, it's going to go up, and then you can keep turning it that same way, and then it'll go down once it reaches the final up position. And the reason why they built that was to keep things from getting jammed. If you notice some of the other table saws, in fact almost all table saws, you turn it one way to go up and then another way to go down. So this is a pretty cool feature, and the key to this will be just setting everything back in correctly so that the gears are set right. In fact, once I take this system out, I'm actually going to catalog and record what position everything is inside here, because this is the main gear system for everything to raise and lower. So that might be important for it to be set correctly compared to where it is now. When I put it back together, make sure everything is connected. Time to take this plate off and see what it looks like inside there. There it is. Yeah, just a half, sort of a half washer. I mean, there's very little friction in there. Look at that. And that is literally, I had one of the, Craftsman 315, I believe it is, that model. And every part about this particular table saw is just 1,000 times bigger. It's just stronger, it's thicker, and just bigger. So again, I think this is 100% a quality saw. Makes it worth the time and effort I'm putting in to doing this whole project, because it is a lot of time and effort. But man, if I can get a beautiful piece of machinery, functional, accurate, and safe machinery at the end, that's going to be awesome. Without having a bearing puller or some other system that I could get behind and just use torque to pull this up, got a little system here. Wow, that worked. Here's the key. There we go. Yeah, that whole system will just come out of there, and there's no bearing in there either. While I was looking for a bearing pulley, they had one open, so the place just let me use it. It wasn't actually too technical, literally just minimal pressure pulled this thing right off. So that's taken care of. The part that is going to be a little bit tricky is getting this shaft to push out through the other side. So let me try to come up with a way to do that. This is the trunnion system fully disassembled. You can see I've got bags for days here, and that's just all the parts and pieces along the way. For now, I'm going to get into the stripping of these components, see what those look like after they're all cleaned up and ready for paint. I've got a little system set up to go ahead and apply the stripper to these parts. Just like I did in the tabletop restoration, I'm going to apply the stripper and then I'm going to cover that with plastic wrap just to keep things from drying out. I put it in a little container. I have a cheap brush to apply it, and what I'm using is the citrus stripping gel. Worked pretty good on the last project, so I'm gonna keep going with that here. All right, that about does it for applying the stripping gel. So I'm going to get these situated and cover them with the plastic wrap. All right, that's about it for this step. While the paint stripper was doing its magic on the trunnion system, I did a little work on the bearings, and what I did is I first sprayed them with brake cleaner and then let them soak for a couple days in fuel injector cleaner, and then throughout that process just scraping around and spinning them, scraping around in there with a plastic brush. Plastic bristle brush, and this is the result. I thought I was going to have to replace those, but they are working great, and so I think I'm just going to use these, and before I reinstall them, of course, I'll repack them with grease and should be good as new. But totally stoked that these actually came out this nice. Last time I cleaned the stripper off with the paint, I used simple green and water. This time I'm going to try acetone for the initial step, see if I can get that to dissolve a little quicker, because it took quite some time to wash it down using the simple green and water, which might have been because I didn't have it, I had it diluted too much. I think the simple green is a pretty strong surfactant, so that I think that would wash it down pretty well. I'm going to try this, just see if I can get through that paint and stripper residue. For this step, I'm just using a nylon bristle brush. The acetone seemed to work pretty well. Just having a little container of it and then a couple different brushes, I just kind of wiped everything down and washed it down to the bottom, and I did that for each part. So what it did is it just kind of thinned everything out and made it move a little easier. There isn't any paint really left on here. I just put another coat of the stripper on, again, to just get anything that might be kind of stuck in the pot marks and everything, the potholes of the casting. So I'm going to try a pressure washer. That might make this a little easier. And then of course I'll hit it with compressed air to go ahead and get that water off there and prevent any flash rust from forming. Let me go ahead and get this pressure washer set up, and I'll see you on the other side of that process. All right, that's it for the pressure washing. I think that was a lot easier. It literally rinsed everything off. Unfortunately, cleaning this up so well allowed me to see cracks. So it's cracked here, ends about right there. Another one in here. I'm not sure what to make of this. I think it is a crack because that pattern, there's a similar pattern on this side. It's not as you know, big, but there's definitely a crack in here. The one I'm most concerned about is this lower crack here. So that basically stops here, goes all the way through, and then projects through to the other side and stops right around in here. The problem with it is it's not just a hairline crack. If I look through it, I can literally see daylight in between the two pieces of metal up here. Only other option is if I could find this half of a trunnion. So that's my next step. It's been about 4 weeks since I discovered the crack in this trunnion, and I'm still wearing the same shirt, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, I did some research on welding this thing, and apparently that's pretty much a no-go. So the next option was something called metal stitching or even pinning. As the engineers at Lock and Stitch helped me look at this piece, we decided that it was just not going to be a structurally sound repair just because of the thickness of the wall. So I honestly thought the project was going to be dead in the water, and that was when I discovered Walker Turner Service Machinery LLC in Connecticut. I've already stripped it and cleaned it. This is pretty much ready for paint, just like everything else. So my next step at this point, let's move over to the drill and we'll start getting these parts wire brushed and cleaned up. I'm all set up here at the drill, and this wire brush has been working really well. I have this set on about 900 RPM because I don't need this thing to go super fast. From what I've read and seen, and just with my experience using rotary tools or machines of any kind, you don't really want to wear gloves. You'd rather have your fingers get scuffed up a little bit than maybe potentially grab a piece of your glove and twist it around. That's never good. So I've gone through and done these bolts. So far these are for the rear fence, and from the corroded, sort of rusty hardware that this was, look at that, those are super shiny. And so I'm going to go through each set of hardware. Because there's so many pieces, I'm not going to sit here and show every single piece. So another option, if you find your hand is slipping and hitting that wire wheel a lot, use something like a little mini pair of vice grips or some other way to keep your hands a little bit farther away while stabilizing that piece of hardware. Even now my fingers are slipping a little bit, and then when that happens, of course, your finger grazes up on that wheel. It's not too bad first couple times, but if you're doing this for a while, it'll start to burn your finger. Just find the balance, whatever works for you. There's a delicate balance here. You want to accomplish your work while not making matters worse or hurting yourself. So, of course, they're not going to go like that, but you get the idea. All right, that's it for this batch. I'll move on to the next bag, and what I'm doing is got a little assembly line on the table over there, so as I'm working on one batch, I've got the other batch soaking. Thought a good idea be to just put them in a mesh or net bag. That way I can just plop it right in the degreasing solution, and everything stays exactly where I have them labeled, so I don't have to worry about everything getting mixed up. These pieces here are from the front fence. They're rusted. Most of the junk is off them though from the degreasing soap. All right, that'll about do it for the front fence hardware. All right, I have spent a considerable amount of time cleaning, polishing, brushing all the hardware for this machine, literally every single piece. Here is the wheel that I haven't done yet. So that's a pretty stark contrast. What I'm gonna do is work on this next wheel and the hardware for that, get those all cleaned up and polished. And then I will set everything out, all the different pieces of hardware, and then I'll show you how everything came out. Let's check it. Here we have the hand wheels. Those polished up pretty nicely. The inside will get painted, and then I'll just leave the rims like that and see how long that lasts me. Have the tilt shaft, that polished up pretty well. Also the elevation shaft cleaned up nicely. And then of course the arbor shaft here, and I'm just gonna leave that in the lubricant bag so it doesn't rust on me. Have the trunnion brackets, those are aluminum. Then the pulley here, that cleaned up really nicely, and that'll be kind of exposed so it'll look nice. And then everything else, all the hardware is in here in their separate bags. And then of course the original bearings, those actually cleaned up really nice. So it's actually, basically it's up to me at this point if I want to reuse those. They're in perfect condition. The only downside to reusing these is they're not sealed. So at some point the machine would have to be disassembled just to get in there again and reapply grease. In the next video, I'm going to get started on the motor. Hopefully I can get that looking and functioning good as new again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.